All right, UFC 310 is now just around the corner. And while some people are kind of looking down on this card because of the perceived lack of star power in the main event, which is only natural considering the fact that one of the guys in the main event has actually never fought in the UFC before. But in this video, I'll be talking about the co-main event, the last minute co-main event between two up-and-coming superstars in the UFC, two guys that are undefeated as of right now, Ian Machado Garry and Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, as I already said, this was a last minute fight. It was just kind of put together kind of out of nowhere. Ian Garry actually already had a fight. He was supposed to fight in Tampa at the end of the year against Joaquin Buckley. That would have been one hell of a fight. Two guys that like to strike and have knockout power. And Belal Muhammad actually was set to fight against Shavkat at UFC 310. Belal Muhammad actually suffering a bone infection. Meanwhile, I didn't know bones could even get infected. Pretty serious injury in all seriousness. But of course, he's Belal Muhammad, so the MMA fan base is for sure not giving him an easy time about this. And while Belal in his last fight did look extremely dominant, especially in the grappling, it's no secret that the guy is not exactly the most exciting fighter that you'd want to watch. So in place of that fight, now getting Shavkat versus Ian Garry, in all likelihood, we're getting a much more exciting matchup. A fight that I think has a very good chance of not making it to the scorecards. And in this video, I'll be breaking down exactly that. Let's get into it. First off, let's start with Ian Garry. At only 27 years old, holding the nickname The Future because, let's call it what it is, there's not exactly a hotbed of talent coming out of Ireland as of right now. Ian Garry has pretty much everything you want to see from an up-and-coming UFC superstar. The guy's got knockout power, fan-friendly style, almost kind of sort of reminds you of a Conor McGregor in a way because the guy has big-time punching power. But at the same time, he's got a little bit of that karate kind of feel to the way that he fights. Always light in his feet. The guy's always quick to throw out some flashy kicks. I mean, just look at the way that he stopped Daniel Rodriguez with a head kick after in the whole build up to this fight, calling out that he was going to stop this one with a left high kick. So the guy's got a touch of that Mystic Mac in him. And, you know, the MMA fan base is the MMA fan base. It's an open secret. They love to hate. But at the end of the day, this guy makes the fans feel a way. Whether you love him or you hate him, everyone wants to see him fight. You either want to see him get a big knockout and shut up all the haters, or you want to see him finally get knocked out for all the shit that he talks. Now, I will say, if you have to find something to criticize about Ian Garry inside the octagon, it's got to be the fact that him, like a lot of the up-and-coming talent in the UFC, has not really fought in anyone's super high level up to this point. Now, the obvious exception to that is Michael Venom Page. But as you see here, Michael Venom Page is a lot older than Ian Garry, more than 10 years his senior. And at the same time, let's just kind of call it what it is. Michael Venom Page was a high-level guy in Bellator, which, as we know by now, doesn't exactly translate all that well to being just as high level in the UFC. And this was an interesting matchup. I mean, Ian Garry is a high level striker, but MVP is kind of top of the food chain when it comes to his striking. So I, like a lot of fans, wanted to see if he was going to be able to truly outstrike someone as skilled as MVP on the feet. But instead, we saw him kind of just dominate the grappling exchanges. Here we see him just kind of sliding right into getting the position on the back, almost sinking in the choke. And that's a testament to how seriously this guy takes his jiu-jitsu training. He's kind of floated around a bunch of different gyms, but he's landed in Brazil as of late. And I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the line we see this guy get a submission victory and prove that he's not just a striker. We always want to compare him to Conor McGregor, but as this guy is as young as he is and progressing the way that he is, he might end up being significantly more versatile than anyone is giving him credit for. But again, if there was a straightforward path to beating Michael Venom Page, it's going to be the grappling. He did not prove that he is, you know, leaps and bounds better as a kickboxer than MVP in this fight. And though he almost got the submission, at the end of the day, he didn't. And there's still some doubt when it comes to Ian Garry that if a high-level grappler is to go up against him, somebody with a wrestling background, someone kind of like Shavkat, how likely or how possible is it that Ian Garry can get dominated on the ground? And, you know, with his high-level jiu-jitsu, you always leave open the possibility of him throwing up a sneaky submission, but if he goes up against someone who's truly dominant when it comes to the grappling, like a Belal Muhammad who has the belt, or like a Shavkat, the #1 contender, I don't know how confident I feel that he's going to be able to stop that pressure simply because we haven't seen him do it yet. And on the other side, we have Shavkat. Now, the thing about Shavkat is he has been, up to this point, one of the most dominant forces in MMA that we've ever seen. Currently standing at 17-0 with 17 finishes. And it's kind of funny because when Khamzat first came to the UFC, the big selling point for Khamzat was that he had finished all of his opponents. And as we saw with the fight against Gilbert Burns, that came to an end the second he fought someone that was truly high level. And with Shavkat, you kind of wonder if the same applies to him, but he has beaten some decently high level competition when you look at his most recent fight, for example, his fight against Jeff Neal, which kind of proved a lot of things, but at the same time opened up a lot of questions as well, because Shavkat actually had a hard time in this fight. And as we know now after the fight, this was not Jeff Neal operating at 100%. I believe he came into this one, I forget if he was sick or if he was injured, but he was not operating at his highest level. That being said, Shavkat was able and willing to not just stand on the feet with him, but pressure him and move him back. Even though everybody else is looking at this as Jeff Neal is the kind of power puncher that could possibly put a stop or at least a dent in the Shavkat hype train. And later in this fight, just as it was starting to look like Jeff Neal was going to be the first guy to take Shavkat all the way to decision, Shavkat was able to sneak his way into a standing submission, which is not something you see all that often, and get the victory by stoppage, proving that at least up to this point, nobody is able to make it the full distance against this guy. So while Shavkat did finally show at least a little bit of a crack in the, unstoppable aura that he has up to this point, he still was not able to be stopped, right? So I don't know how much that really says about him. So I guess at the very least now we know that he's human, but it's a very interesting fight when you look at the head-to-head matchup. And when you really dive into kind of just the raw stats, the tail of the tape for this one, obviously both these guys are undefeated. Both these guys are relatively young. I would say Shavkat's probably right in his prime, and Ian Garry is entering it as we speak. And while Ian Garry does have a little bit of a height advantage in this one, Ian Garry actually has a reach disadvantage in this one. And I think that is kind of saying something, because Shavkat likes to mix it up a lot when it comes to the fight. And Ian Garry, as we all know, is mostly a striker. So it's going to be interesting to see if Ian Garry is going to try to stay long in his strikes and pick Shavkat apart. Especially with Shavkat potentially, at the very least when it comes to reach, having an advantage when it comes to some of the boxing exchanges. Both these guys are incredibly accurate strikers. I believe Ian Garry is number 3 all time in the welterweight division when it comes to significant strikes per round. So the guy has a crazy high work rate. And here we see Shavkat with a 100% takedown defense. I don't see Ian Garry initiating the grappling against a guy like Shavkat. And I do think it's very much possible for Shavkat to get the advantage over Ian Garry. So final prediction, this one is kind of tough, but it's just plain hard to not go with Shavkat. The guy is undefeated, has won every single fight by finish. And just looking at both of their records, Shavkat's fought in a higher level of competition. He's been able to win in more versatile ways than Ian Garry. And again, that 100% takedown defense, you would imagine Ian Garry's game plan on this one is going to be to keep this fight on the feet, whereas Shavkat could be taking this fight a number of directions. One interesting thing to note is Ian Garry, who has bounced around a whole bunch of different gyms, has before trained with Shavkat when he's training at Killcliff. And these guys have spent probably a lot of rounds sparring together. He might already have some confidence. He knows certain shots that he's more susceptible to landing on Shavkat, and which shots that Shavkat maybe more susceptible to be getting hit by. But as any MMA fan knows, when it comes to sparring, it really doesn't say that much, because sparring is not fighting. The level of intensity in there is going to be completely different than what these guys are used to from training together. And if either one of these guys comes in thinking that they already know what works against their opponent because they've trained together, they could be in for a rude awakening. So again, final prediction, I would have to choose Shavkat. Come on, he's Shavkat, right? But I truly would not be surprised if Ian Garry is able to get this one done. The guy is an absolute sniper. He might not have the same level of reach when it comes to the boxing, but I think with how insanely long his legs are and how good of a kickboxer he is, I'm not ruling out him landing something major, potentially a head kick or a body kick. Or if Shavkat tries to take this one to the ground where he might think that he has an advantage, it definitely would not shock me if Ian Garry throws up a sneaky submission. And Ian Garry being basically a full-time Brazilian now, I'm sure he's got a plan A, B, and C. So while Shavkat is definitely the favorite for a good reason, I think that we're going to get a badass fight. Both these guys are pretty much right in their prime. Winner of this fight is the #1 contender, so I'm sure both of these guys will bring nothing less than their A game. And yeah, Can't wait to see it. Let me know in the comments below. Who do you guys think is going to take this one? How do you think this fight's going to go? Do you think it's as competitive, or will it be as competitive as I think? And yeah, thanks for watching.